output. Consequently, most cavalrymen of Europe initially killed their and their horses' armor, but for the heavy lancers, this nearly led to even higher armament costs. Apart from that, the horses of the heavy knights were some of the stronger breeds, and thus required more fodder. This was not just a money problem, but also that it was difficult to provide food for the horses. They frequently starved to death on longer campaigns. Moreover, due to the feudal structure, these aristocrats were often accompanied by a small band of servants and footmen who needed food and pay too. All of this added to the already extreme costs, which went into purchasing and training the very rare horses suited for this task. Such expenditures ruined more than a few nobles. The need for more flexibility on the battlefield and the cost and efficiency of the heavy lancers produced new types of cavalrymen. At first, the demi-lancer, a lighter lancer unit, less armored, usually with an open-faced helmet and generally more flexible, and eventually the cuirassiers. Technically, the Black Riders from Germany were such cuirassiers. They were in use for much of the 16th and 17th century. Cuirassiers in general, however, were used longer than that. Most famously perhaps by Napoleon, who used them to great effect in the early 19th century. It was in 1546, during the Schmalkaldic War, however, when the Black Riders made their first appearance. Because they were mercenaries exposed to fierce competition, the Black Riders had to be hyper-efficient from a financial point of view. So, in order to have an advantage over the heavy knights, they quickly abandoned the expensive armor. They ditched the horse armor entirely and used the so-called trot armor. Some call it three-quarter armor, which did not protect the legs all the way down, but allowed for better control of the horse. These sets of armor were often made of inferior steel. For the steel to be resistant to rust, armorsmiths used rust, which darkened the armor, making it black, and thus giving the Black Riders their name. Over the course of time, these armors were mass-produced with exchangeable parts, which made them even more cost-effective. Later on, cuirassiers would use a simple breastplate for their own protection. The Black Riders changed things up in the weaponry department, while the French and Burgundian heavy knights still relied on charges and bombs. The Black Riders integrated gunpowder weapons early on, in particular the wheel-lock pistol. Due to the rather average force of these early pistols, they were essentially melee weapons. One horseman could up to 6 of them at a time, which allowed them to outrange the swords of the knights in cavalry occasions, who usually dropped their lance after the charge.
Our base is under attack.
That it was much simpler to master. Almost anyone could pick up a pistol and put it to good use, but it required hours upon hours of training, both man and horse, to master the lance. In spite of all these innovations, during the 16th century, vice-versa lancers and Black Riders still go either way. The Black Riders' pistols opened up new ways of dealing with high formations, to which the lances of the heavy knights didn't find a satisfying solution. Towards the end of the 15th century, the Swiss mercenaries and German Landsknechts began to use long pikes deployed in square formations. Many other Western European powers quickly adopted this formation. It was not unlike the ancient Greek phalanx, but unlike its ancient counterpart, it had to deal with much more heavily armored-mounted knights. Its depth was intended to break the charges of these mounted noblemen in open field battles, who could pack a punch when charging enemy infantry lines. During the 16th century, this formation made charging infantry ever more dangerous for mounted knights. The Black Riders found an unusual and only partly successful solution to this problem. Early on, they simply refrained from charging pike formations. Instead, they rode close to the formation in waves, fired their wheel-lock pistols, and returned to the rear of the formation. Nowadays, this technique is called the parallel. In early modern sources, however, the term refers to various other techniques. John Clouseau, a contemporary military writer, for example, wrote that Caracal was a maneuver in which a formation of cuirassiers received an enemy's charge by wheeling apart to either side, letting the enemy rush in between the pincers of their trap, and then charging inwards against the flanks of the overextended enemy. However, there is some disagreement among scholars regarding the caracal tactic in the modern sense of it. In the 1950s, the already mentioned Roberts
Construction
argued that the
complete.
caracole tactic was merely a farce to keep the mounted nobles busy on the battlefield, because they were no longer needed as heavy launchers.
Not a problem.
In his opinion, infantry was now the heavy army. Recent researchers, such as Clifford J. Rogers, Robert Frost, or Ronald S. Law, usually agreed with the sentiment that cavalry, especially lancers, had an increasingly hard time on the battlefield.
Unit lost.
That grew in importance. However,
Unit
neither
lost.
Roberts' notion that the caracole was merely a fake maneuver, nor that the lance
Unit
became entirely
lost.
useless, is generally accepted anymore.
New
Much of the
construction
disagreement
options.
is owed to the tiny effective range of the wheel-lock pistol,
Building.
depending on the target, is
Unit
zero
now
to
moving out.
3.5 meters, at most 5
Waiting
to
for
10
knowledge.
meters.
Affirmative. Yes.
Even at a very close
Moving
range,
out. Acknowledge.
well-armored
Moving
cavalry
out.
or fighters
Acknowledge. Moving
were
out.
protected
Acknowledge.
sufficiently against
Moving
projectiles
out.
fired from these types of pistols. Historical
Moving out.
manuals
Construction
suggest
complete.
usually to discharge the pistol only when one could see the white of the enemy's eyes, or to put the
Building.
weapon directly against the enemy's armor. However,
Yes. Moving out.
many infantrymen were armored
Moving out.
of poor
Acknowledge.
quality or none at
Acknowledge.
all.
Unit
out.
ready.
Yes.
Experiments have shown
Building.
that a lead
Yes,
ball
moving
fired
out.
from a wheel-lock pistol
Affirmative.
could leave its barrel at up to
Unit
1,000
ready.
Moving
feet,
out.
which implies that it
Building.
would still wound
Moving
or
out.
severely hurt a poorly armored
Moving
man.
out.
Unit ready.
But
Acknowledge.
how did things look in
Building.
practice? Let's have
Unit
a look at the
ready.
Battle of Dreux in 1562
Unit
as an
ready.
example for 16th century
Building.
cavalry warfare.
Reporting.
Unit
It is
ready.
one of the
Waiting,
earliest
moving out.
armed conflicts
Unit
in the Huguenot
ready.
Wars.
Yes, sir.
19,000
Building.
men of the Catholic Party
Unit
clashed with
ready.
13,000 Protestants.
Unit
Like most
ready.
armies of the mid-16th century,
Building.
both war parties had
Unit
infantry
ready.
which possessed
Unit
only 2 firearms.
Unit ready.
The historian Geoffrey Parker
Building.
notes that even up to the 30 Years' War, most armies were still pike heavy.
Reporting. Right away, sir.
Parker
Right
concludes
away,
that,
sir.
quote, the use of firearms in the field remained in its infancy throughout the
Unit
first half
ready.
of the 16th century. And
Building.
however, at
On
Dreux,
hold.
the entire left flank of the
Cancelled.
Catholic army
Reporting.
rallied
Affirmative.
early, after
Yes,
a
sir.
successful charge of the Protestant
Acknowledge.
horsemen.
Yes, sir.
The
Affirmative.
Swiss in Catholic
Affirmative.
service
Unit
were
ready.
the only ones still holding
Building.
the center. However, they still counted very few skirmishers in
Ready.
their ranks
Affirmative.
because of their
Reporting.
infamous military conservatism. Thus, the caracole of the Black Riders hired by the
Unit
Protestant army
ready.
was quite
Yes.
effective.
Waiting for
Construction
knowledge.
complete.
They did not break the Swiss formation, but they inflicted
Insufficient
over 1,000
funds.
casualties to their
Moving
Swiss
out.
competitors.
Moving out.
That is to
Vehicle
say,
moving
half
out.
of the Swiss mercenaries died.
Moving out.
In the
Acknowledge.
end, the sturdiness of
Moving
the
out.
Swiss and the fact that the German
Acknowledge.
horsemen
Affirmative.
preferred to plunder the
Moving
baggage
out.
train of the French after they had annihilated the enemy cavalry
Yes, sir.
still led to a Catholic.
Affirmative. Moving
Nevertheless,
out.
the success of the Black Riders was a great
Acknowledge.
surprise to the
Moving
military
out.
commanders of the
Acknowledge.
time. Soon, they became some of the
Unit
most desired
ready. Yes,
mercenaries of the
affirmative.
French, Spanish, and
Acknowledge.
English monarchs. While other
Affirmative.
European
Yes, sir.
armies usually
Affirmative.
appreciated that the caracole
Acknowledge.
posed a threat to stationary fighters, it
Acknowledge.
quickly became
Moving out.
apparent that
Acknowledge.
this wasn't the
Yes,
case if enough musketeers were added to the fight. Towards the end of the 16th century,
New
the
construction
balance in pike and
options.
shot formations shifted in
Low
favor of
power.
shot, which is especially well
Building.
documented in the Spanish tercios. The historian
Building.
Geoffrey Parker
Yes, sir.
explains that the ratio of shot to pike in the Spanish tercios
Yes, sir.
fighting in the Netherlands
Reporting.
shifted from
You
2
got it.
gunmen to 5 pikemen
Construction
in
complete.
1571 to
Unit
3
reporting.
gunmen to 1
Knowledge.
pikeman 30 years later in 1601.
Vehicle
Because
reporting.
muskets
Yes.
outranged wheel-lock pistols by a
Affirmative.
lot, it became increasingly dangerous to ride
Yes,
up at
sir.
a trot to a pike and shot formation
Acknowledge.
with masses of musketeers. However,
Moving out.
the caracole did not become entirely
Waiting.
useless.
Not a problem.
Clifford J.
Yes,
Rogers
sir.
explains that a rolling caracole could pin down an enemy formation, and that the assailing
Yes.
horsemen
You
forced
got it.
infantry
Affirmative.
formations to present their
New
pikes to
construction
defend against a
options.
potential charge.
Unit
This
ready.
meant that they could not
Our
maximize
base
their
is under
firepower
attack.
against the enemy infantry by moving the shot to the first rows.
Building.
Thus, the infantry
Yes,
had
sir.
to alter
Moving out.
advance when threatened by a caracole,
Repairing.
which in turn exposed
Yes,
them to
sir.
artillery
Yes,
and
sir.
musket fire.
Waiting. Roger.
Moreover, the historian Ronald S. Law points to King Henry IV,
Repairing.
who used his mounted cuirassiers in a Fabian strategy.
Knowledge.
The term Fabian
Affirmative.
strategy goes back to the War of
Construction
that was
complete.
used by the ancient Roman dictator Quintus Fabius Maximus
Our
Verus.
base is under attack.
After the Romans had suffered devastation
Structure sold.
Hannibal, most famous
New construction options.
Yeah.
Silos needed.
Ready.
large engagement when dealing with Hannibal's invasion of Italy. scenario,
Waiting order.
a force armed
Right away,
with
sir.
pistols
Vehicle
makes
reporting.
sense.
Acknowledged. Yes,
Also,
sir.
deploy
Unit
other
lost.
such as the
Acknowledged.
demi-launchers,
Yes.
mounted arquebusiers. But Henry didn't shy away from open
Building.
battle either. He frequently
Building.
bested the enemy launcher
Vehicle
formations
charged.
by deploying his
Lost.
Black Riders in French cavalry, 6 to 7 ranks deep, while the enemy lancers
Affirmative.
attacked in their usual
Unit
2-rank
lost.
formation,
Affirmative.
which is called
Yes.
tournée in French.
Yes, sir.
In the ensuing melee, the Black Riders were more mobile and
Acknowledged.
could
Yes.
shoot up to 6 pistols.
Yes.
The swords of the lancers and falcons were not as effective in these melee
Ready and waiting.
engagements. Ronald
Yes.
S. Love points
Unit
out that
lost.
Henry
Got it.
IV had his own
Unit
heavy
ready.
cuirassiers, and his German
Building.
mercenary riders charged home
Unit
with
Yes,
spear
sir.
hands
I'm on it.
frequently.
Yes, sir.
Unit
This leads us
lost.
to a
No
common
problem.
misconception
Unit
about cavalry
ready.
in the
Perfect
16th
knowledge.
century.
Building.
Many believe that from the 1560s onwards, pistol-armed
Unit
cavalry
ready.
was only used to shoot
Building.
However, Ronald S. Love and Clifford J. Rogers argue
Unit
that
ready.
horsemen were usually expected
Building.
to shoot and retreat for a few waves
Yes, sir.
before
No
charging
problem.
home
I'm
with
on
their
it.
swords and
Unit
sabers
ready.
I'm
as
on it.
soon as there would be an
Building.
opening. Take, for example, the English
Unit
officer
report,
Francis
yes.
Vere, who
Unit
reports the
ready.
following
Got it.
about the Battle
Moving
of
out.
Turnhout in 1597. Quote, "We
Building.
charged their pikes, not breaking
On
through
hold.
them at the
Yes,
first
sir.
push,
Construction
as
complete.
used by the man-at-arms
Unit
with their barbed
ready.
horses.
Yes,
But
sir.
as the long
Building.
pistols delivered
Go,
over
brother.
Insufficient
i.e.
funds.
Yes, sir.
at very short
I'm on it.
range,
Yes, sir.
Repairing.
would make the ranks
Yes, sir.
thin. So thereupon the rest of the horse got within them." End quote. This
Waiting
statement
order.
makes
Yes,
it clear that cavalry
Unit
was not used
ready.
exclusively
I'm on it.
as simple
Building.
shooting
Keep 'em coming,
tactics in the
Keep
years
'em
leading up
coming.
to the 30 Years' War.
I'm on
The
it.
Swedish king Gustavus Adolphus
That was
is
left.
often
I'm on it.
credited as the one who
That was
abandoned
left.
the
Keep 'em
That
coming.
created
Unit
the
I'm on it.
1620s.
Unit lost.
However, Rogers notes that this assumption is often based on failed cavalry charges, in which cavalry did not charge home due to lacking discipline or motivation,
Yes, sir.
leading them to retreat in a caracole-like manner. While Gustav was not the first to discard the caracole, he did order his Swedish horsemen and German mercenaries alike to charge
Yes.
home instead, and popularizing
Our base
short
is under
salvos of
attack.
cavalry charges
Affirmative.
once again. Given the value of such
Acknowledged.
charges to Barclay during his campaigns in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, where he frequently placed winged hussars, who, remarkably enough, would go on using lancers for
Acknowledged.
many years. Yet both Gustavus's campaigns
Building.
and the successes
Vehicle
of the
reporting.
hussars are topics for future
Moving out.
videos.
Building. Repairing. Our base is under attack.
Yes, sir.
The Polish winged hussars dominated the Eastern European theaters of war for much of the early modern period, while the Western
Unit
European art of war of this period relied on infantry-heavy pike and shot. Eastern armies continued to rely on cavalry. On the battlefields of Italy,
Yes, sir.
Unit
Down,
ready.
rock and roll.
Yes, sir.
heavy
Building.
cavalry such as knights and lancers
Affirmative.
found a
Yes, sir.
counter in combining pikes and
Construction
muskets.
complete.
Western European battles, according to the historian Jeffrey Parker, were
Low
fought
power.
primarily with infantry.
Yes, sir.
Building.
In Eastern Europe, by contrast, cavalry was still key. The Polish cavalry, most notably, not only frequently bested the Muscovites
Yes,
and
moving
Ottomans
out. Unit
on their
reporting.
eastern and southern
Acknowledged.
front respectively,
Moving out. Yes,
but also
acknowledged.
defeated Western powers, such as the Swedes under Gustavus
Reporting.
Adolphus.
Got it.
Unit ready.
Therefore, some scholars argue
Building.
that early
out.
modern
Right away,
Western
sir.
military
Yes, sir.
doctrine lacked a crucial component, namely a cavalry unit, such as the Polish winged
Ready,
hussars,
waiting.
that frequently
Unit
successfully
lost.
opposed towards steel
Our
tanks.
base is under
It is not
attack.
surprising that the winged
Construction
hussars
complete.
eventually influenced the Western armies,
Insufficient
and they did
funds.
so lastingly.
Unit
To understand
ready.
this development properly,
Building.
the period between
Acknowledged.
1550
Yes,
and
come on.
1620 is
Ready and
key.
waiting. Vehicle
This
Repairing.
is a look at how
Affirmative.
contemporary historiography
Yes,
discusses
moving
the
out.
early successes
Yes.
of the Rangers.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Repairing. Unit ready.
September 1605,
Wait,
Karl
wait.
IX of Sweden
Unit report.
abandoned the siege
Acknowledged.
of Riga and chased a small
Acknowledged.
Polish force down the Dwina.
Unit
Swedes
lost.
caught up with the Polish near the town of Kirchholm. The historian and expert on the Polish-Swedish wars, Robert Frost, stresses the fact that on the morning of September
Yes,
22nd,
acknowledged.
Our base is under attack.
were arranged in pike
Moving
squares
out.
of 30 by 30 men, drawn up in a
Unit
typical
report.
Western battle order
Moving
of
out.
4 lines, with 4 infantry battalions in the first line and 6 in the third line.
Building.
During the enemy's inferior cavalry.
Yes.
That is the horsemen forming the second and fourth line.
Construction complete.
No problem.
Keep it coming. No problem. I'm on it.
Unit lost.
No problem.
Yes,
sir.
New
You got it.
construction
Keep us
optional.
coming. No problem. Keep us coming. No problem. Guy, I'm on it.
Of which were
I'm on it. Present for you. Coming.
Infantry.
No problem.
Being
You got
outnumbered,
it.
almost
You got it.
3 to 1.
I'm on
the
a
Polish
present
intended
for
to
you.
lure the Swedes
I'm
out
on
of
a
their
present
superior
for you.
position.
Unit lost.
Yes,
His
sir.
light cavalry skirmished
Moving
the
out.
field
Affirmative. Ready and
He
waiting.
ordered his
Yes,
force
sir.
to close ranks, so that
Yes,
it
sir.
appeared even
Vehicle
smaller
reporting.
than it was. After
Vehicle
4 hours
acknowledged.
of waiting, he
Moving
pretended
out.
to withdraw. Unwilling
Acknowledged.
to let the Polish escape,
Yes.
Karl pushed
got it.
forward
Affirmative.
onto the plain.
Yo.
The Swedish
Yes,
cavalry
sir.
of the second
Yo,
line
you
was
got it.
deployed on the wings to
Vehicle
provide flanking
reporting.
cover.
Yeah, I'm
while
on
the
it.
infantry of the first line closed up and
Reporting.
advanced to the bottom
Yes,
of
sir.
the slope
I'm on
with
it.
9 field guns.
Cannot deploy here.
Swiftly waiting exactly for this
Silos
movement,
needed.
suddenly turned their horses around
Building.
and smashed into one of the Swedish
Primary
infantry
building
squares.
selected.
This was not intended to break
Unit
the Swedish
ready.
infantry, but to disorder it.
Building.
All along,
Yes.
the
Unit
Polish were aware
ready.
that they had to win on the
Primary
flanks
building
quickly.
selected.
They attacked with numbers,
Nuclear
particularly
weapon
the
available.
Polish-Lithuanian line.
Building.
Supported by steady infantry,
Nuclear weapon
900 to 1,200
Our base is
Cossack
under
horsemen
attack.
charged up against 720
Nuclear weapon
attacking the flanks.
Building. Unit
After a
ready.
short-lived resistance, the
Building.
Swedish cavalry was shattered.
Affirmative.
Unit ready. Building.
Third
Yes.
line.
Unit
Within half
ready.
an hour, the Swedish cavalry was in
Unit
retreat
lost.
on both flanks. While the Lithuanian light cavalry was pursuing them, the hussars could turn on the infantry in the Swedish center. The Swedish infantry was now separated into 3 groups, facing combined attacks from the firepower of the Polish infantry and the shock attacks of the hussars.
Yes, sir. Now.
The result was a massacre.
Unit reporting. Ready and waiting.
The
Affirmative.
Swedish
Yes.
infantry was largely butchered where it stood.
Yes. Affirmative.
Typical was only one of many decisive victories
Construction complete.
of the war.
Building.
Series of conflicts
Unit ready. New construction
in the
option.
17th century. Yet
Mission
despite such
accomplished.
successes, many historians, among them the Swede Peter Michael Englund, have noted that the strong reliance on heavy cavalry was a feature of a supposed eastern backwardness. This opinion on heavy lancers was shared by many contemporary Western tacticians. For example, the famous Maurits of Orange, who made significant advances in contemporary tactics, prohibited the mounted lancer altogether.